This week on the Four Rivers Ag Report, we just came down to see what condition our corn's condition is in.
Also, Smithfield is taking its bacon on a slow boat to China.
And we look back on someone's look at the future of the farm.
That and more on the Four Rivers Ag Report.
Welcome to the Four Rivers Ag Report. I'm Fred Peralta.
And I'm Monica Becker. We're finally beginning to see some green around here. The corn is growing and you can even spot a few bean sprouts peeking out into the sunshine.
What sunshine.
Yeah.
Now, we thought that since we have a large area to check out, we'd talk to someone who's responsible for a large area. Jim Loaf from the local extension office. And with me now to talk about a very odd spring and planting wise is Jim Loaf. He's the director of the local extension office. And Jim, what are you seeing out there?
Well, I see a lot of start, stop, and sometimes in one day it's start, stop. I look back at the first spring I was here, 2002, and we had a really good start. Not that we had a really good start this year, but we had a start. And then we were out of the field for nearly 30 days. Mm-hmm. So, will this be similar? We'll see.
Well, I've noticed how quickly, that 3-day push that got 70% of the crop in, I was amazed at how fast the corn sprouted. It was one of the advantages of getting in late with the warm soil, wasn't it?
Yes, it was warmer. We had moisture. Warm, moist is what we need to get it started. Mm-hmm. And if you look, we had a pretty good seed bed to start with in most cases, so all those conditions were in place. And fortunately, we didn't get it packed too hard, so it had trouble coming through.
Okay.
So, good start. Good
start on the corn. Beans, we've pretty much gotten way late on that, haven't we?
Well, I think a lot of the people that had the capability planted beans and corn at the same time, not maybe initially, but as we got into the second or third wave of planting. Mm-hmm. And to look, say, 10 years ago versus today, the size of the planters has grown. There was a lot of 6 rows, a lot of 8 rows then. Now you rarely see less than 12, 24, right. 16 to 24 might be the norm. So they can plant a lot of corn in a hurry.
Okay, so we're on our way, more or less. We need some warm, dry weather, don't we?
We need some nice weather. We don't need to bake it. That's one of the problems we have. When you have moisture like this and you get in and maybe the dirt's a little heavy and you plant, is we can get a pretty hard surface bake down there. Difference between now and 10, 15 years ago is we used to cultivate or rotary hoe a lot. Mm-hmm. We don't do as much of that. Mm-hmm. Probably still have a lot of the equipment there. Cultivating might be out of the question, but there might be some chance for rotary hoe. The corn's probably going to get ahead of that, right. The corn that's planted.
Right. I've seen a lot of V2, V3 corn out there. That's past the point we need to worry about that particular problem, right?
Yes. It could in fact pack the yield, but we're beyond probably some kind of intervention. And, we began to see some yellowing in the last week or so. Hopefully the sun will take that out. Hopefully it's not some other problem.
Now with this wet soil, and it's wet, or we have to worry about compaction much?
Oh yeah, and I think replanting some of these wet holes, of course it's probably going to be a while before you want to go into some of those spots, or you may end your planting season there. You don't want to drive over good corn maybe to plant some marginal corn, so you need to evaluate how big it is and really think about what you may get out of it. And I've seen people at times put soybeans in if it gets late enough into some of those spots, if they're big enough. It might be an alternative, but if you plant corn back in there now, you probably can't get some short varieties. You'll wind up with some 105, 110-day corn, and then you're going to be 10 points moisture difference possibly at harvest.
Right. So have you seen or heard anybody who's decided not to plant corn in a certain field and go ahead with beans?
I haven't. I think a lot of those decisions would be based on last fall's treatment of the ground, how much nitrogen.
Right.
Probably the chemicals would be more of a concern than the nitrogen, so you don't have any stunting or possibly failed germination if you did that. I think, if we had the crystal ball and knew what the weather was going to be in July and August, we could say, no reason not to plant corn today.
Okay.
But it's a gamble, and they're good at gambling.
Okay, well, yeah, you can't be a farmer and not be a gambler, right?
Right.
Now, speaking of nitrogen, there was some concern that given the drought and there's a lot of fields with too much nitrogen in it already. Did farmers take note of that when treating, or?
I think there was some saving of spring applications of nitrogen. I don't know how that went. Some of them probably didn't have a chance to get it on. Still plenty of time to do that,
Okay.
if they feel like there's some reason to do that. We really do not have a really reliable test for that, because nitrogen availability changes a lot with moisture, with temperature, with all kinds of things going on in the soil. So it's not affixed to particles as well as P and K would be. So
Okay.
it's a little more difficult animal to deal with.
Okay. Are you seeing any farmers who are beginning to worry that they won't be able to plant anything in certain fields?
No, I think over the last, say, 4 or 5 years, we've seen an abundance of tiling. Now, that doesn't cure every problem, but it's certainly moved a lot more water than we would have historically. Another thing is the hybrids we have now. From 10 years ago, they have really strengthened the growth potential of these hybrids as far as, taking some hits environmentally and still being able to go on. So it's really a hard thing to predict at this point.
Well, we have nothing but time this summer to sit and watch,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Well, Jim, thank you so much. We'll have you back soon, and you can check out our test plot.
All right.
Fred, I have a small confession to make.
What have you done now, young lady?
Well, this week on a social media site, I posted, "Sorry, farmers, I missed the drought. I'm sick of the rain." I mean, I didn't mean to diss you guys.
You disrespected? Monica, I think you misunderstood. I think you were echoing the thoughts of 90% of our viewers, especially the ones that haven't finished their planning yet. Many people are kind of cranky.
Well, my crankiness aside, let's talk about the farmers. The annoying and heavy rain slowed down planting and is making some of the brand new crops have to learn how to tread water. Statewide, total precipitation averaged 3.7 inches, with some regions receiving close to 4.5 inches. And with that much water, can replanting in some fields be far behind? Topsoil moisture levels across the state were rated as 41% adequate and 59% surplus. Locally, our area reported at 32% adequate and 68% surplus. Subsoil moisture statewide was rated as 1% short, 60% adequate, and 39% surplus. And locally, no one is reporting short. We're at 66% adequate and 34% surplus. Corn planting was 91% complete compared to the 5-year average of 95%. Corn emerge progressed to 81% compared to 99% last year and the 5-year average of 83%. Corn conditions were rated at 2% very poor, 8% poor, 31% fair, 48% good, and 11% excellent. Soybean planting was slowed by weather conditions this week, but still progressed to 49% complete. As the report numbers suggested, many farmers are looking at some land and wondering if and when they might ever get a chance to plant. Todd Gleason reports on one more tool that farmers might consider.
There is a provision in the federal government's revenue protection or combo crop insurance products that allows a farmer to make a prevented planting claim. It is used in years like this one, where for one naturally occurring reason or another, a crop just cannot be sown in a timely fashion. This year, it's too much rain. The time has now arrived to make that claim, or at least decide whether it is better to plant corn late or to make the prevent plant claim, says University of Illinois Extension Farm Management Specialist Gary Schnitke.
That preventive planting payment is 60% of their guarantee. So if they have a corn policy, it would be the 568 projected price times their APH yield times their coverage level. Whatever that guarantee is, 60% of it would be the preventive planting payment. And they could have signed up for higher levels of that, 65 and 70, but they would have known if they had done that at crop insurance sign-up time.
The financial trade-off then is taking the minimum 60% guarantee or planting a crop and hoping.
Taking preventive plant is an attractive alternative, particularly if you've taken a high coverage level. It's 85, 80% coverage level. Preventive plant payment will be larger in those cases because you have a higher guarantee. So if you're in those sort of 85 and 80% coverage levels, and taking preventive planting is worth looking at, particularly if you're looking at it and seeing that we have a lot of acres planted already, and if we get normal yields on that which is planted, we could see lower prices.
It makes Prevent Plant an alternative worth exploring. This is done by comparing the payments to the expected yield of the late planted corn times expected price. Subtract input costs from both and see which one is more profitable. One other note, Prevent Plant had better be pretty widespread in the county or the claim may be rejected. For University of Illinois Extension, I'm Todd Gleason.
And while we're on the topic of wet ground, remember just a couple of months ago when we were worried about the Mississippi being too low? Not so much of a problem anymore. The Mississippi is at its highest level since 1995, about 10 feet over flood stage in St. Louis. And on Wednesday, a levee breach occurred at the Consolidated North County Levee near West Alton, Missouri. And the mighty Mississippi is also responsible for at least 3 lot closures in Clarksville and Winfield, Missouri, and at Granite City, Illinois. Flood fight teams are currently deployed along the Missouri, Mississippi, and Illinois rivers to monitor levees and provide technical assistance and supplies to local flood fighting efforts. Remember the drought? Well, one of the consequences was the lack of feed, and that caused the sell-off of cattle. Low beef prices last year means higher beef prices this year. Bob Ellison reports.
Beef prices are going to keep rising for the rest of this year. That's according to a U.S. Department of Agriculture economist who says greater beef exports combined with shrinking domestic supply is pushing up prices.
International demand for these foods has been growing, so we've seen demand going up while supply has been flatlining or even going down a little bit. The drought contributed to that as we saw ranchers across the country liquidating their herds in an effort to reduce costs. And so here we are in 2013, where beef prices are, in many cases, are at record highs and are going to continue to climb until the cattle inventories start to really expand to meet demand, which, because of the size of these animals and the costs associated with growing them, probably won't happen until 2014.
Poultry and egg prices are also increasing, but Volpe says prices in the rest of the supermarket should be pretty stable for the rest of the year.
The impact of the drought is looking like it's going to be less than was originally forecast. And what that means is that we're on track for a year of basically normal food price inflation. We're forecasting a range of 2.5% to 3.5%.
And Volpe says pork prices should be flat this year.
The inventory of hogs has been increasing a lot faster than has been the inventory of cattle. We've also seen consumers shifting away from pork products and towards poultry products, which historically in the last few years have been relatively less expensive.
In Washington, D.C., for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, I'm Bob Ellison.
The USDA has another problem on its hands. Officials say they're doing all it can to reassure trading partners that there are no food safety concerns related to U.S. wheat in light of the recent discovery of transgenic wheat on an Oregon farm.
We are informing our trading partners at every step of the way. We have clearly reassured them that there is no food safety concern related with this product, and we are working to make available a validated test in case some of our trading partners want further reassurance that this product is not in commerce. But again, we have no indication that this product has entered commerce, but we are making sure that we continue to complete this investigation to the fullest extent and to reassure our trading partners in every way possible to keep U.S. wheat moving throughout the globe.
The website Farm Policy reports that Monsanto has provided the USDA and U.S. trading partners a testing method to distinguish the wheat trait.
With me now on this week's On the Map segment is our friend Chris Langen from the Eastern Illinois University Geology Geography Department. And Chris, You're talking about, this week you're talking about something that's near and dear to a lot of farmers' hearts, the CRP program. First of all, what is that and how is it, what's the history of that?
The most recent Conservation Reserve Program started, or was part of the 1985 Farm Bill.
Let me step out of the way. There it is.
And yeah, these are the acres that have been put into CRP since 1986 when acres started going into the program. And over that time it's had ups and downs as acres have gone in and out throughout the 10-year contract history.
What is the reason for these ups and downs?
A lot of it tends to deal with the economics of agriculture. If crop prices are higher, if cash rent prices are higher than what they're getting for their CRP payments, then they tend to get out of the program when they can. The changes in CRP that we've seen lately, this last sort of period of CRP decline, started, not surprisingly, in 2007 when we had high crop prices. So as soon as those CRP contracts were coming out or expiring, farmers were putting their land back into production, especially in areas in the drier areas of the western high plains up into the Dakotas through Montana. Historically, it's been land in these areas where it's marginal cropland. You can see this picture here is from the Dakotas. You know, land where soil quality is fairly low, slope can be fairly high. There's a few different qualifiers that FSA
Okay, so this is land that is marginal at best to farm on.
Marginal at best to farm. Probably shouldn't have been farmed in the first place. It was, so this was a way of putting that land back. After it goes back, as you'll see on the next slide, it usually tends to go right back into, in this case, soybean production.
So they're farming up to the road.
Up to the road, we're kind of getting back to the whole fence row to fence row thing again. But in this case, we're seeing why CRP is coming out as cropland prices,
Now this slide is showing us that initially the value for the CRP contract was higher than the cash rent?
Yeah, and initially they were very comparable. South Dakota, North Dakota out there were a little bit more of a discrepancy. But yeah, you can see as soon as we get into these more recent years in 2007-8, you know, they tended to go back into production.
Okay.
On this slide here, we see that there's two different types of contracts. There's these green bars which show the general signups. This was how CRP started, big tracts of land going from cropland into grassland. What we've seen now since the late 90s, smaller pieces of land which were going into more specific types of programs, buffer strips and so on.
This is some of the land that would be best served by CRP, correct?
Yeah, and like again, instead of retiring these huge pieces of land, these are two examples, of farmable wetlands program and the grass filter strips programs, where we're concentrating the efforts of conservation on smaller pieces of land, leaving more land now open for production.
So this is actually a very valuable tool for protecting soil and land water quality, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it is.
Where are some of the major changes happening?
Some of the major changes are happening again out in the Dakotas, into Montana. We're seeing them down in the western high plains where irrigation lands are coming back in a little bit more now with the increased crop prices. But CRP has been a really big impact on U.S. land use and land cover change over the years. It's this, you know, we tend to think of urbanization as a big land change type of issue. CRP has changed about 84 million acres of land in our country over its 25, 26-year history. So it's been very important in altering sort of these ecological systems that are out there on the landscape.
And depending on which report you listen to, the Farm Bill, CRP is one of the pawns in the program.
Yeah, you know, there's certain proponents of it who want to see it go away, and there's certain proponents who want to see it stay. So
well,
it's always up for debate.
It's going to be very interesting to see what happens to that land if CRP goes away.
Yes, likely to go into production, but who knows?
Well, Chris Langen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
By now, many of you have heard about the huge sale of the Smithfield food to investors in China. What you might not have known is that Smithfield is a large pork producer known for brands like Eckrich, Armour, Cook's, and Farmland. What does all this mean to U.S. pork producers and U.S. pork consumers? Purdue agricultural economist and livestock specialist Chris Hurt has some thoughts.
Well, as we look at the implications of the Smithfield's merger on the U.S. pork industry, it's clearly too early to say what the implications are going to be. But I think the opportunity could be quite large. We could look back on this 5 years and say this was a fundamental turning point for globalization of the pork industry. We won't know that for some time into the future, but there is the opportunity. So let me talk about what that opportunity could mean. Clearly, China is the largest population country of the world. It is the largest pork producer by far and has by far the largest consumer market for pork. The policy in China has primarily been self-sufficiency in pork production. Now what that means is we'll produce our own pork. They do import a little bit, but primarily to cover shortages in their own country. That policy may be at a point where they can't keep up. That is, they can't increase domestic production quickly enough to meet those growing demands. China's wealth increase, their incomes increase, are really driving substantial increases in meat consumption, and meat is pork in terms of the big consumption in China. So I think the first opportunity is that this could mean that we will see more production of pork in the U.S., and that will be processed in the United States and move into export channels headed to China and Hong Kong. Now that could be quite large. We saw in 1995 where China made a decision to become primarily an importer of soybeans. They had been primarily self-sufficient on soybeans up till 1995. Then they made the decision that they would be self-sufficient in rice, wheat, and corn production, but they couldn't produce enough soybeans. So they decided to go outsource the soybeans and set off a huge demand growth for soybean exports, both from the U.S. as well as South America. That was really a fundamental factor in giving U.S. prosperity in the last 5 to 7 years in agriculture. So could this be a factor as big as that? Well, it has the possibility. On the other hand, we don't know that that's the case. Chinese policy has been primarily self-sufficiency in pork production. It could well simply mean that they want to open those linkages so that they can source more pork from the United States if they need it, but it's not their intent to do that. So only in the case of, say, emergency shortages. So we don't know that in the short run, but opening doors of opportunity, sometimes we get more trade because we open those doors of opportunity, and that's what I would see here.
Hi, I'm Jessica Killo with your Inside Extension. Give your brain a workout. Sign up for brain training to be held on June 17th and 24th from 1:30 until 3 o'clock p.m. at the Shelbyville Senior Center. Extension educator Sherry Burcham will be teaching this class as part of the Lakeland Community Programs. Register now at lakelandcollege.edu. All ages are welcome. The Illinois Farm Bureau and Grain Handling Safety Coalition are partnering to provide grain handling safety training for farmers, farm employees, and commercial operators in Coles County. The training is meant to help farmers and employees identify, avoid, and eliminate the hazards of handling grain. The training will be held at the Lumpkin Family Center for Health Education at Sarah Bush Lincoln Health Center in Mattoon on Friday, June 28th from 1 o'clock until 5 o'clock p.m. There is no cost to attend. If you are interested in registering for the event, contact Mary Cox at the Coles County Farm Bureau at 345-3276 or Dave Shiley at the University of Illinois Extension at 543-3755 to reserve your seat. And don't forget, we are on Twitter now. Follow us at UIEXT19 to receive updates on agriculture, master gardeners, family life, 4-H and youth, and more. In addition, we have created a new Twitter account just for ag updates. We will be tweeting pertinent and timely crop information. Follow us at UIEXT19AG. As always, like us on Facebook and visit our website to stay up to date on our programming. From U of I Extension serving Coles, Cumberland, Moultrie, Douglas, and Shelby counties, this has been Jessica Killo with your Inside Extension.
You know, you can't live long and not see visions of the futures, flying cars and moon cities. And it's usually fun to see how far off base the visionaries were. Well, the website Gizmodo found and published an interesting historical document. They found an old version of the magazine Science and Invention. And in 1922, it presented the Electric Farm Deluxe. It presented various ways that electricity could be used to modernize the farm, from refrigeration and cooling of the barns, a time clock for the hen house, for what I don't know, electric planters that followed power lines up and down the fields, and a stump remover, for trees, that is. Now, it's easy to make fun of all this, but remember that in 1930, 9 years after the magazine ran, only 8% of American homes, both urban and rural, had refrigeration. And of the 6 million farms in America only in 1922, only 3% had electricity. It wasn't until the middle of the Depression that the Rural Electrification Administration provided the push to get power to every corner of the country. And much of what the Electric Farm Deluxe predicted is either here or has been improved with other power methods. But Monica, I have one question. Where is my flying car?
Maybe it's waiting to deliver your grow hairinator.
You are evil, aren't you? Okay.
Just saying. That's it for this week. Work hard, be safe, and enjoy those beautiful sunsets. I'm Monica Becker.
And I'm Fred Peralta, and thanks for watching the Four Rivers Ag Report.